The following is a presentation of the Sovryn Tech podcast feed.
Ready for your weekly tech fix? Want to know how technology sets us free? Well, get ready because here it comes. You're listening to Sovryn Tech with your host, entrepreneur and technophile Brian Sovryn. He's got a huge brain. And now, here's Brian.
Here I am, the Golden Stallion of the tech world, Brian Sovryn, here for another great episode of Sovryn Tech. Before we get into today's story, it's a really nice story, but before we get into that, I want to mention on SovrynTech.com, there has been a couple of changes, and one of those changes is that on the Google Plus link, that will actually take you now directly to my personal, Brian Sovryn's Google Plus page. And you can interact with me there directly. I'm on Google Plus all the time. So, don't hesitate to make use of that. Don't hesitate to put me in your circles, be it acquaintances or following or whatever. I fully welcome it. And I think Google Plus is a great time. I'm getting such a great response from kind of the international audience of the show. And so I want to make everything as available as possible to them as well as to everybody in the United States. And Google Plus really has turned out to, in many ways, to be the best way to do that. So you can find that through SovrynTech.com, but also, now you'll notice this on the Google Plus page as well as on SovrynTech.com. There's a QR code on the pages for, one is for Bitcoin, they're clearly labeled, one is for Bitcoin, and the other QR code is for Litecoin. And that is so that you can, if you wish to donate to the show, I've had a lot of people ask me, Brian, I'd like to donate to the show. How can I do that? Now, there's the Amazon link, which has been possible to use to do that. But now also, if you do want to directly donate to the show, you can do it through the SovrynTech.com or even the Google Plus page, even the Sovryn Tech Facebook page. It can be done on. Now, some may think that comes as a degree of a 180 because one of the reasons I did not want to accept donations for the show, or I did not, want to accept, any kind of payment or whichever. Part of that was due to the fact that I didn't want my quote unquote ideas to be bought and sold. I did not, but here's the beauty with Bitcoin and Litecoin, unless you tell me, I have no idea who even donated. Do you get what I'm saying? So, like, CBS can't send me Bitcoins and say, hey, okay, now you need to review our products and be nice, or you need to not review the products we don't want you to review, kind of like CNET does now and The Verge does, where, their opinions are bought and paid for by CBS. So that can't happen. I mean, even if CBS said, look, hey, we're the ones that sent you, 50 Bitcoins or 1,000 Litecoins or something, how can they prove that? I have no idea that they're the ones that sent that. So anyway, if you do, I'm doing this by request. People have requested, look, I really get something out of your show, Brian. I'd like to send you, some thanks. And I've gotten plenty of emails of thanks, and that's great. But they wanted, to do something kind of monetary. And so there you have it. You can now send Bitcoins or Litecoins directly to the show, to Sovryn Tech. So make use of that if you wish to. Okay, so let's get right into today's the opening story, which I think is really great, and it's from Lifehacker, and it's kind of a guest post by a guy named John Gorzin, and it's, I raised my kids on the command line, and they love it. Okay, what's the command line? The command line is, you have a GUI, what's called a GUI, GUI, graphical user interface. And that is like when you look at Windows or you look at Apple, OS X or whatever, since everything's all pretty in pictures and all that stuff, that's a GUI. That's a graphic user interface. As to where the command line is, like, if you can remember what DOS looked like, or if you've ever seen like people doing like hacking or something, where it's all very, everything's all text. And you have to type in commands to do anything on the computer. You can't click on anything. There's no mouse. That's what they mean by command line. So we'll go right into the story. This guy is raising his kids on the command line. 2 years ago, my son Jacob, then 3, and I built his first computer together. I installed Debian on it, that's a Linux distribution, but never put a GUI on the thing. It's command line and has provided lots of enjoyment off and on over the last couple of years. The look of shock I get from people when I explain, as if it's perfectly natural, that my child has been able to log in by himself to a Linux shell since age 3 are amusing and astounding, especially considering that it is really not that hard. Instead of learning how to run an Xbox, he's learned how to run Bash. I like that. Lately, Jacob, now 5, hasn't been spending much time with it. He isn't really at a stage where he wants to push his limits too far, I think, but yet also gets bored with the familiar. So I thought it was time to introduce a GUI in a limited fashion, perhaps to let him download photos and video from his VTech toy camera. And he's familiar with the concept, at least somewhat, having seen GUIs on Tara's computer and mine. Tara would be his wife. So last night, Oliver, age 2, and I went down to the basement on a mouse finding expedition. Sure enough, I had an old PS2 mouse down there that would work fine. The boys both helped string it through the desk up on our playroom, and were tremendously excited to see the red light underneath it when the computer came on. Barely able to contain the excitement, really. A bit like I remember being when I got my first mouse at a bit of an older age, I suppose. I helped them in as root for the very first time. Okay, that's bad English. Jacob typed root, and I typed the password and provided the explanation for why we were telling the computer we were root. Now, you have to be a root user to do anything like really serious in a computer, and so he's teaching his kids, okay, this is why you have to be, in root. To do anything here, to be able to add in, because what they're doing right now is he's actually teaching his kids how to manually add in a mouse. And so that's why they have to go to root. This is pretty deep stuff. Let's see. Then while we waited for software to download, okay, so they're doing the apt-get where they typed in a command in Linux that says apt-get, and that goes online and downloads the driver for the mouse so that the mouse will work. While we waited for software to download, I had to answer repeated questions of how soon will the mouse work and what does install mean. Remember, the kid's like 5 years old. I think the other one was 2 years old. Finally, it was there, and I told Jacob to type Start X. I intentionally did not install a display manager. More on that later. I pressed enter. The screen went blank for about 5 seconds, and then X appeared. Excited. Can't begin to describe how they acted. They took turns playing with the mouse. They loved how the trash icon, they started with crossface, which is that's a GUI, showed trash in the trash can. So again, all this stuff that's perfectly like normal, to the average computer user, where you see trash in the trash can, you see, like all these icons do little things, like when you drag and drop something, you actually see the file that you're moving kind of like graphically drag and drop along with it. And these kids are just like, whoa, yeah, they barely had any idea computers did this because they're so used to everything being on the command line. But they were just learning the mouse. We'll go on with the article, and there's a lot about a typical GUI that is unfriendly to someone that isn't yet proficient with a mouse. The close buttons are disappointingly small. Things can be too easily dragged on and off the panel and menus. When I sat down to think about it, the typical GUI design does not present a very good, it always works the same interface that would be good for a child. And then it occurred to me, the perfect GUI for a child would be simply Xmonad, which is a tiling window manager that can be controlled almost entirely by keyboard and has no need for mouse movements in most cases. So it's a GUI that runs mainly off a keyboard. No desktop environment, no file manager in the root window. Just a window manager in the classic X way, of course. So after the boys were in bed, I installed Xmonad. I gave Jacob's account a simple .x session that starts a terminal and Xmonad. Today, Jacob informed me that he wanted his computer to look just like yours. Playing right into my hands, that was. But when he excitedly typed Start X, he said it wasn't just like mine. Uh-oh. Turns out he wanted the same wallpaper as my computer uses. Whew. We found it. I figured out that XLI1 loads it in the root window, and so I added a third line to the X session, more delight unlocked. Jacob mastered the basics of Xmonad really quickly. Alt-Shift-C to close a window, Alt-Shift-Q to quit back to the big black screen, Alt-Shift-Enter to get a terminal window. I like that, the big black screen. He watched impatiently his app get, counted down a minute and 30 seconds for Tux Paint and its library, so he's putting little programs on there, a painting program. Then we launched it, and he wanted to skip supper so he could keep playing Tux Paint on his very own computer, my very own computer, he said. I've been debating how to introduce GUIs for a long time. It has not escaped my attention that children that used Commodores or TRS-80s or DOS, all three of those I've actually used. I had an old Radio Shack computer, which is the TRS-80 with the Tandy, and I also had the Commodore 64, and obviously DOS was life-changing for just about everybody. In the 90s anyway, the early 90s, DOS was the thing. Anyway, the children that used Commodores or TRS-80s or DOS knew a lot more about how their computers worked on average than those of the same age that used Windows or Mac OS. I didn't want our boys to skip an entire phase of learning how their technology works. I am pleased that with this solution, they still run commands to launch things, yet get to play with more than text-based programs. At bedtime, Jacob asked me very seriously, "Dad, how do I start Tux Paint again?" First you log in and type Start X, then you can use the mouse. Jacob nods, a contemplative look on his face. That's so cute. Then I continue, you type Tux Paint in the terminal and it comes right up. Jacob nodded very seriously a second time, as if committing this very important information to long-term memory. Then gave a single excited clap, yelled, "Great!" and dashed off. It's like the kid just went, "Yeah!" And it was, it was really nice. And, it makes me, I can't help, the key to this whole article, okay, now, first off, it's beautiful that parents are interacting with their kids in such a serious way, and not treating a child like it's a little idiot, you know what I mean, or that it's a little fool, that the dad is like, no, you know what, the kid can understand completely how command line works, how GUIs work and all that stuff. I just have to explain it and take the time and connect with the child. And I think, okay, first off, I mean, that is the most beautiful thing that you could possibly read, in any tech article, I think. But I want to reread a certain paragraph because this is something that kind of hits home for me, and this is going to kind of turn into an opinion piece on my part. And the paragraph is, I'd been debating how to introduce GUIs for a very long time. It has not escaped my attention that children that used Commodores or TRS-80s or DOS knew a lot more about how their computers worked on average than those of the same age that use Windows or Mac OS. I didn't want our boys to skip an entire phase of learning how their technology works. Okay. This is kind of the thrust. No one knows how computers work anymore, it seems. No one understands, like everyone just, it's a graphic interface and it just does it and it just works. And I agree with the father here that I think there is something missing. It's amazing how, in my generation, I was born in 1981, okay? There was always a computer in my house, if not multiple computers, of course, growing up. And it's interesting that, okay, I have an older brother, and he is not, actually he's dyslexic, and not because of his dyslexia, but in many ways he's not the brightest brick on the block. However, and he doesn't like technology. He's kind of like a self-sufficiency kind of guy to some degree. He lives out in the woods, he's not a technology guy by any means. But interestingly, he can do more with a computer than probably 75% of the world's population. Part of that is not that he spent any grand time like learning it, or that he's like keeping up to date on the latest Linux distribution or things like that. But part of it is because he's used computers from the very beginning, and thus he knows the core of what makes a computer work. Does it make sense what I'm saying? he has like, it's like if you're going to teach life, you know, how life works, or like literally how life exists, like how a cheetah somehow exists, you know, it's like, what if you started at the atomic level and you taught life from that level and then up, and then everything would kind of make sense, right? I mean, do you follow me? And so I think it's a very powerful thing because, you know, the command line hasn't gone away. DOS has really, I wouldn't be shocked, okay, if DOS wasn't still somehow at the very core. I know they say that it's not, all right, but now DOS is this command line, the disk operating system. It used to be, to get into Microsoft Windows, you would have to, your computer would actually first, this was back in the 90s, your computer would first boot into DOS, and then you would have to, you know, like a little letter would appear that said C:/, and you'd have to type in windows.exe. Actually, you'd have to type in cd/windows, and then you'd have to type in windows.exe, but that's getting technical. Anyway, to get into Windows, like Windows 3.1 or Windows 95, in fact, to get to Windows 95 is win95.exe, whatever, that's all technical stuff. Okay. And I think, really, I think DOS is still kind of in there in Windows. And so my point being is that if you have like this base knowledge of how computers work, it's amazing how well you can easily adapt to any other kind of computer. And I think this is something that's missing. I'm reminded of, you know, the internet. When, we'll say like in 95 and 96 when it first started, you know, it wasn't until like the early 2000s that suddenly there was this big scare that, oh, there's predators on the other side of the screen, and they're gonna, you know, they're gonna steal your children, and they're gonna, you know what I mean, like all this bad stuff. You can't trust who's on the internet and all that. Well, interestingly enough, I feel that in like 1996, you could trust to some degree the person on the other side of the screen that you would talk to over the internet. Why could you do that? Because there was an instantaneous level of knowledge that you both shared, because it wasn't easy to get on the internet back then. It wasn't easy to figure out a chat room back then, unless it was like America Online, but who used that? So, you know, there was that set knowledge that you had that you could both share, and there was that set like pride. There was like that instantaneous pride that you both felt for being able to talk to, you know, just being able to talk to each other. You're already like, it was like you're two guys that were climbing a mountain, and you both got to the top of the mountain, you know, and you're just like, yeah, good job. You're just happy to talk to each other, you know. And, you know, I don't want to make the claim. There's some people that kind of make the claim that, you know, computers were never meant for everybody to use. Full disclosure, I have said that in the past, that computers were not made for everybody to use, but that's just not true, because computers are for everybody to use. It's a beautiful thing what technology is allowing so many people to do, everybody to do. You know, I mean, computers are allowing for tremendous, you know, entrepreneurship. You know, everybody's doing their banking, and you have Bitcoins and Litecoins that are all over the place with, you know, with computers, which is just fantastic. You know, that people have control of their money thanks to computers, and the money has gotten away from, you know, from the banks thanks to computers. You know, I love how far all this technology, you know, has gone. No question about it. But I guess, you know, I'm feeling like that I wish, you know, more people would get into kind of the nuts and bolts of their computers. You know, an interesting point is that, and most people don't realize this, the average person doesn't need anything more than Windows 95. Windows 95 had everything. It had, you know, it had Internet Explorer, so it has internet. It has, you know, it had everything that anybody ever uses in computers. The only thing, and it's not like the use of computers has changed that much. I mean, Microsoft has tried with Windows 8 to change how it works, but everything still pretty much works the same. You know, it's icons, dragging, dropping, you know, and all that stuff. The only reason that computers have gotten any more powerful, really, is maybe to run Photoshop, if that, but is like for video games, you know. And I think there's something, speaking of video games, I think there's something to the statement that, that this father was making, that his son wasn't learning, how to operate an Xbox. He was actually learning how to use a computer. And that's a very powerful thing, because if you can understand the base level of how a computer works, you can handle any piece of technology. Maybe that's the point overall I'm trying to make, is that I think it's a good idea to at least get some understanding, of how, of the real nuts and bolts of how a computer functions on the software level. The hardware level really is easy. People, I totally understand, division of labor, and I don't want everybody to be computer experts and whatever. I'm not saying that. Okay. But, the hardware side of things is really, really easy. Most people just don't realize it. But, putting together a computer it's as simple as Legos. I'm not saying that because I'm some kind of, really intelligent person, which I am, but I'm not saying that because of that. I'm saying it not really is just, it's that simple to do. But, it's a powerful thing to have that good of an understanding of computers, especially when we're in a world where computers literally do run everything. And, I want to implore my listeners to maybe look into this stuff, to understand, one of the best things, one of the most fun things you can do, you can go to newegg.com, okay? And they will help you as much as they can. They have whole videos and programs on, how to build your own computer, because it's a really empowering thing to build your own computer, to build your own access to the world, to, it's you can't, until you build your first one, you don't know. And it can be done for cheap. Computers can be built for a couple $100 these days, halfway decent ones. And it's just, I can't express to you just how awesome it feels to finally build your own computer. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in this episode during the listener email section. But because I got a question, okay, how do we build a mining rig? And building a mining rig is it's a computer. A computer is a computer is a computer. And so I'm imploring my listeners, I think the story is so beautiful, again, just on the level of that parents are connecting with their children in such a wonderful way. But, I like how it shows that, anybody can learn this. And the point of just how adaptable you are to any computer and how well you can know a computer just by working like the command line, or just by getting that deeper understanding, just how incredible that can be. And, learning how to use things, and understanding them does set one more free. Anyway, I'll be back with more Sovryn Tech. This is Brian Sovryn. You're listening to Sovryn Tech with me, Brian Sovryn, the man who always wears triple black. Sovryn Tech is a show about science and technology and how it can set you free. Remember, Sovryn Tech only endorses businesses and products that we genuinely believe in and support ourselves. If you have a product or website that you would like to have reviewed, you can email the show at sovryntech@hush.ai. Please keep in mind that the reviews on Sovryn Tech pull no punches. Thanks for listening.
Tech Roulette. Want to play?
It is time for Tech Roulette, where I cover the stories that get submitted to me, be it through Sovryn Tech at hush.ai, through sovryntech.com, or even through the Google Plus page or the Facebook page, all of which can be found across the web with an easy search. Or you can go to sovryntech.com and it connects to everything, or even on Twitter. So, stuff gets posted there at least once a week. I'm not as active on Twitter as I am on other things, just because I kind of, a little sidetrack here, I kind of have a beef with Twitter in that they readily and seemingly happily will remove political posts, oppositional political posts from users' that the users post in various countries. They've done it in Australia. They're talking about doing it in Iran and Saudi Arabia, where they're just like, oh, yeah, this goes against the regime that's running things. Okay, we'll delete that for you. Don't worry. That is so unfree. That is so disgusting. And nobody's really up in arms about it. And in fact, I've only seen one place that broke the story, about that. So it's kind of like something that I wonder if Twitter's like, anytime somebody says on Twitter, hey, Twitter's deleting our post, they delete the post that does it. You know what I mean? So I have a real problem. That's not to say other social media sites don't kowtow to governments too. I'm sure to some degree they do. But Twitter is particularly bad about it. Anyway, so we have a story this week from someone that wishes to remain anonymous, and it's from The Guardian in the United Kingdom. I have a lot of listeners in Britain. I'm very happy about that. And this is scientists create transistor-like biological device. Stanford researchers demonstrate transcriptors inside E. coli bacteria in advance in synthetic biology. Okay, so what's this all about? Let's read on. Again, you can find all these stories are linked to in the show notes, and you can get the show notes at SovrynTech.com. You can get it at the SoundCloud page, SoundCloud.com/SovrynTech. It's all there. Scientists have used biological tissue to recreate one of the main components of a modern computer inside living cells. The biological device behaves like a transistor, one of the tiny switches that are etched onto microchips in the billions to perform computer calculations. Okay, so they've created the biological equivalent of a transistor. The researchers demonstrated the device inside E. coli bacteria, one of the most common bugs used in genetic engineering. The work marks one of the latest advances in the growing field of synthetic biology, which recasts biology as a tool set for engineers. Writing in the journal Science, researchers at Stanford University explain how their biological transistors could be connected together inside living cells to perform computing jobs, such as controlling how genes are expressed in an organism. Led by Drew Endy, a pioneer in the field, the team showed that different arrangements of biological transistors worked like logic gates, which take input signals and process them into different outputs. In keeping with their heritage, Endy calls these arrangements Boolean integrace logic gates, BIL logic gates. Normal transistors control the flow. Okay, a logic gate. See, what a logic gate is on a transistor is it's like the last piece that tells exactly how the information going through the transistor is supposed to come out. And it can close off certain things from getting in. In fact, funny story. Like if you ever saw the original movie Tron, there's a point where they actually they close the door, and it's called a logic gate. And then, in fact, the villain in it, Sark, says, okay, bring in a logic probe. They don't actually say it's a logic gate, but then he says, bring in the logic probe. Because what it is that it would be the logic probe, which can, these things kind of exist. It figures out, okay, exactly how do we get, what can go through this logic gate? How can we get through it? How can we break it? Okay, anyway, so it works sort of like a battering ram of sorts. So if that gives you some idea of a better picture of what logic gates are, hope that helps. Anyway, normal transistors control the flow of electrons along metal wires. In the biological device, dubbed a transcriptor instead of transistor, it's a transcriptor. The wire is a strand of DNA, and the electrons are replaced by an enzyme. A modern computer chip holds several billion transistors that are wired together to carry out calculations. The same can be achieved with transcriptors, each of which is built from about 150 letters of the genetic code. Scientists hope to build computers within living cells that perform useful jobs. The first thing that can be done are more precise biosensing. You can see if a cell has been exposed to different combinations of chemicals and have a specific signal only when a certain pattern of interest shows up, say glucose and caffeine, said Jerome Bonnet, the first author on the paper. In the longer term, we hope biocomputers can be used to study and reprogram living systems and improve cellular therapeutics, he said. Cellular therapeutics is a field of medicine that draws on genetics and cell biology to generate and replace dead or diseased tissues and organs. As part of an ongoing effort among synthetic biologists to build up a stock of components, the Stanford team has made the designs of the transcriptor and BIL gates public and free to use. Awesome. Okay, most of biotechnology has not yet been imagined, let alone made true. By freely sharing important basic tools, everyone can work better together, Bonnet said. Last year, the UK government invested more than £100 million in technology designed in part to help Britain compete in a market for synthetic biology potentially worth $100 billion. The Pentagon has invested heavily too and asked scientists to pitch for funds to back projects that range from chemical sensing to new ways to detect enemy troops. Well, before we get into that end of things, let me just totally congratulate the Stanford team here for just making this essentially open source and putting it all out there, free to use. You know, it's all public knowledge. Look, we're not holding on to this. You know, this isn't going to be some kind of crazy patent. Just, you know, let's start making this happen. Let's get this information out there. And because when we're all working together, it'll develop 20 million times as fast. And you get what I'm saying, and you get what they're saying, and it just makes sense, you know, and they're going to get the credit on the paper, you know, for the rest of their lives. And, you know, if this ends up being something huge, which it appears they have the potential to be, you know, they get the credit and they don't necessarily need the money. But I'm sure there's cash prizes involved as well anyway. Unfortunately, as it seems with a lot of technologies that the government really has nothing to do with, other than maybe, you know, funds and grants. Unfortunately, it seems like the military already wants to get in on this, you know, with detecting enemy troops. But, you know, let's talk a little bit more with now how would they detect enemy troops with this chemical sensing? The idea is that I'm guessing that not enemy troops, as in like the good guys, would have these, you know, literally these transcriptors, okay? These biological transistors would send a specific signal that would look different from the enemy, and so you could tell who's who on a battlefield, maybe, something like that. Positively terrifying because, quite frankly, I don't care how someone shows up on a detection screen. They're all human, and there's no need to treat one different than the other. So that bothers me, obviously. I wish, you know, with these transcriptors, with these, you know, transistor-like biological devices, what I wish we could figure out is like, you know, how could we turn off the communications going on in living cells that somehow, you know, lend someone to want to go to war. But no, I don't want to control, you know, the human condition in that fashion. And, you know, I suppose that's a concern that a lot of people have, is that this sort of technology would, while it can be used to, you know, maybe control certain, you know, like they mentioned caffeine, you know, so could these transcriptors, could these essentially cut off the effects of caffeine when you drink it, you know? And so then I suppose people could wonder, okay, you know, what else could these kind of like cellular, you know, what could these machines at a cellular level essentially, what else could they cut off, you know? And so I could see where people would be very concerned. And I think that's part of the reason the emailer sent this in, is that they're concerned that somehow this is going to turn into biological control of the human condition by governments. And I mean, this is at a really early stage, you know, to say that somehow that's the idea or that's what they wanted to do. And I'm not entirely sure that all that's even really possible, you know. I mean, maybe I could envision somehow this technology, again, if it can control through the proverbial logic gate, what they call a BIL gate, if they could control, like, you know, certain types of things running through your system, like maybe like it could keep adrenaline from getting to your system or something. Maybe could that make somehow a passive, you know, human race, you know, that's susceptible to taking orders or something. I suppose maybe, you know, maybe that's something that's coming. I don't know. I mean, that gets into some serious conspiracy territory that there's people that would actually want that to happen. But, when you mess with some of this stuff, I mean, maybe there's ways for this to help with disease, and that'd be great. To turn biology into a literal form of engineering where you can actually and picture an engineer working on a machine where, they lay out the plans for the machine and they can, okay, this cog does this does this does this, that's actually beneficial to humans overall. Because maybe we could find out, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I know this is information that's been passed around quite a bit by various news sources or on various documentaries or whatever. The idea that, we don't know why we age. Like, we don't understand cellular decay or something. And maybe that's true, maybe that isn't. But, could this help with solving that mystery? If that is such a mystery, sure could. So there's a lot of really beneficial things to take out of this too. Not just necessarily, they're going to control us. They're going to control us. They're going to rewrite our DNA and all this stuff, and they're going to do it for the bad. I think, I really think, granted, I understand that there are people that are in power, there are governments that are in power and that they often can control money and that they talk from the top down and, and they get people, generally good people to do very terrible things. But I think generally people are good. And I don't think, I really do kind of have the belief that, if scientists were asked, okay, you need to figure out how to make humans do this and do that they would say no. I mean, maybe that's just me being hopeful. And of course, me being an atheist, I believe that humans are generally good, that they're not born bad. Now, if you're more of a more sinful bent, if you believe in the idea of original sin, then obviously you believe that when someone's born, they're instantly bad. And so, yeah, sure, of course they do this. But I think the average person just wants to be left alone. I do not think the average person is a megalomaniac. I do not think the average person has the desire for that kind of control. And I certainly think that if there is, that if somehow that's not the average, that's a byproduct of a society that teaches those platitudes, not that they're, inherent within humans. And I suppose that raises a question too, what is the real importance to this? Is in fact a lot of this, now, I mean, if this can help with diseases and aging and all that stuff, that's great. That makes it worth it. But if we really want to make lives better, maybe we should be looking more at psychological answers. Maybe we should be looking more at, self-therapy, or going to for therapeutic sessions and, seeking out, therapeutic professionals. I mean, those are all actually very powerful things. And I think there's a lot more answers in that so much than there are, in trying to rewire, how our brains work. Now, interestingly, I like the idea that somehow it could counteract maybe the effects of caffeine. But, I wonder if this could be used for alcohol. You know what I mean? I remember in Star Trek, I have to mention Star Trek every episode, I guess. They had what was called synthahol, where it was alcohol without any of the effects. Now, frankly, this is just my own opinion. I am not insulting people that drink alcohol. I am not insulting the producers of alcohol or people that enjoy alcohol. I am not doing that. But to my own opinion, frankly, if alcohol doesn't have the effects that alcohol has, what's the point? Does it really taste good? I mean, I think beer tastes like piss. It's terrible. And I'm not a drinker at all. In fact, I make it a point to really not drink. But, and that's not a judgment. I'm just laying out an opinion. But anyway, I suppose it'd be interesting. I mean, if there's people that genuinely get a real enjoyment out of alcohol, maybe these transcriptors, these biological logic gates can keep, alcohol from maybe affecting the brain so much. It's interesting. I mean, the possibilities seem relatively, endless. And of course I'm not a doctor, and I'm theorizing on a lot of how this stuff actually kind of works. So, but again, I think the main point, the reason that this article was sent to me is I think someone was like, okay, hey, they're going to like somehow put this stuff in the water, and then it's going to infect your system through like some degree of nanotechnology or something, this is nanotechnology. I mean, it's synthetic biology. So no, all right, inaccurate. It's not nanotechnology. Synthetic biology would be a different thing. Nanotechnology would still be a machine, essentially, but this is like reordered biology. So, I don't see that happening. Is it a possibility that that's what people would do with this kind of knowledge? Sure. But at the same time, what's the, what can allow you to sleep at night when this kind of thing can exist, And really, to me, that's the fact that it's open source, that how it's done and how it's made is available to everyone to, possibly even counteract what, say, some terrible government would do, with being able to control biology at this level. So you have that. And that just goes to show, I mean, on Sovryn Tech, we talk a lot of times about open source and how important it is, to have that kind of that transparency, to have that accountability that exists out there so that people can see, everything that goes into everything. And granted, we can't all know, like I said in the last segment, all right, we can't all know everything. We're not all polymaths, and I think today there's just so much knowledge out there. It's pretty much impossible for one person to know it all, as hard as I've tried. You can't. You can't all know it all, but you can support and trust. There's a phrase out there now that I love. It's called trust the geeks. And we can, that's just really it. We can trust the geeks. We trust the geeks with Bitcoin. We trust the geeks with so many things, with what we do on the internet, even liberty stuff. We trust people that create like CryptoCat, which is, a cryptographic, messaging service. We trust them that they're not doing anything with it. We trust the guys that develop Tor that they're not doing anything, malevolent, with this technology. So trust the geeks, in my opinion. And I think this is really actually just very exciting stuff and not so much anything to worry about. This is Brian Sovryn. I'll be back with more Sovryn Tech.
Are you ready?
I've never seen anyone so treated like a god in my life.
Brian Sovryn as guest co-host tomorrow night, and so that should be a good show.
On that note,
we just added Brian Sovryn.
Okay, we haven't.
Oh,
is he good?
He's been in the audience.
He's certainly got opinions on things. Yes.
I'm so close to being like God. No one is above me. Okay, absolutely no one. I don't take orders from anybody, and I mean that's how much closer to God can you get?
Is there anything he doesn't do better than everyone else?
Oh, that's just his way of talking.
He's one of the best.
Break it down!
Catch Sovryn Tech, the show about technology and how it can set you free with me, Brian Sovryn. That's SOVRYN at SoundCloud.com/Sovryn Tech.
Wow. Oh. It's a website of the week.
It is time for Website of the Week, where I discuss websites that I consider, maybe helpful for my listeners, or something that I've found very helpful, or just, really well done, maybe even a website that almost looks like fine art. You know what I mean? And this website that I'm going to talk about this week actually falls under the very helpful category, and it's becomingwhoyouare.net. Now, in the last segment, we talked a little bit about how, doing psychology, or, looking into yourself, working on yourself, all those kinds of things, can really, like therapeutic type things, can really help you out and kind of bring you to that next level, of who you are. And this is the site, in my opinion, to go to at the very least get started on it, but it can take you all the way, in my opinion. This is really, really great stuff. It's becomingwhoyouare.net. And again, it is very philosophical. It's very psychological. And there's all kinds of, it's by Hannah Brame. She has multiple books available. A couple of them you have to purchase, but they're great. There's the Guide to Sentence Completion. There's the Ultimate Guide to Journaling, which is great. I've read that. Journaling is a very, very helpful thing to do. She has there's some free books on there. The 5 Most Common Blocks to Authentic Living. She offers coaching through the website. I mean, there's tons here. She has a podcast that is, I actually listened to an episode the other day, which had things I never even really thought about before. It was amazing. And one of the things I really, really love about this, because I know what you're thinking when you start thinking, okay, I need to go see a therapist. A lot of people just instantly go, look, there's nothing wrong with me. Why do I have to go see a therapist? That's ridiculous. You're insulting me. And I can totally understand that way of thinking. I think all of us have kind of been there one way or the other, or one time or another, and that society kind of like teaches that. But this is the beauty of becoming who you are. Pretty much everything on there. It's not judging, and it's not telling you that you're defective. It's not telling you that you're broken. Okay. It's saying that there's further to go, that you can be more happy by working on these things. It's not saying you're not happy. It's saying that you can be more. It's very powerful, because so many of these different philosophical and psychological, commentators or people, whatever, are just always telling you, yeah, no, you're messed up. Sorry. And you're messed up forever. And actually, that was one of the powerful things of the podcast I mentioned earlier, that Hannah Brame did through becomingwhoyouare.net, came right out and said, the idea that you're just always, like you're always broken is, just isn't so. And that's amazing. I loved hearing that. Just a fantastic, statement to make, especially in the world of like therapy and self-therapy. So there's all kind of, like I say, there's a podcast here. There's great links to websites. There's tons of tools. She offers personal coaching, I believe, on the website. There's even like wallpapers to put on your background to keep you, thinking about things, like one that says act, don't react. It's loaded, and I can't recommend it enough. Great resource to look at. Becomingwhoyouare.net. Check it out. This is Brian Sovryn. I'll be back with more.
Time now for 90 Seconds on Sex with Dr. Paul.
It's simply not possible for a couple to become pregnant without a male partner's participation. Yet the instructions that most young men receive about birth control is limited to information about condoms, which are not one of the more highly effective methods of contraception. Now, while a lot of young men are interested or curious about birth control, they often feel as comfortable talking to a new partner about contraception and unwanted pregnancy as they are talking to her about tampons and period gear. One of the big problems with not teaching young males about birth control pills, IUDs, the patch, the implant, and the NuvaRing is we never give them the words to know how to have an intelligent conversation with a partner about different forms of birth control. So we're basically blindfolding them regarding a life-creating and life-changing event. We think it's important that high school students graduate with a knowledge of geometry and algebra that few will use in their lifetimes. Yet we place no value whatsoever on their graduating with a knowledge about effective kinds of birth control, which is something that will impact each and every one of them for the rest of their lives. If the only kind of birth control you know about is condoms, please visit different birth control websites and learn about the options that are more effective.
For more, visit 90secondsonsex.com.
It is time for listener emails. And, just before I get into listener emails, I just want to make a couple other points about that are relative to our website of the week. And, becomingwhoyouare.net, it's all about living authentically, really being you, not being someone else, not being even, there's talk about the false self and the true self, all of which is really interesting, but it's all about being the true self, or at least respecting and listening to the true self, and again, living authentically. And I like to think of it, someone a while back made the great point of that doing things like this, doing this kind of self-therapy or looking into living authentically is sort of like hacking your brain, to work its most efficiently. And, it's like trying to fix bugs in the software. You know what I mean? And I think that is so powerful, great stuff to do, and because the more efficient, the more honest that we can be, I think the greater our lives are in general. So just a great thing. So again, just one more time, becomingwhoyouare.net, check that out, and live authentically. That's live the good life. And Sovryn Tech's all about living the good life. So listener email, here we go. And this one was actually sent, it's anonymous, but it was sent through SovrynTech.com, which has a built-in, ask Brian a question feature. So you don't have to actually even use the email sovryntech@hush.ai. You can just use SovrynTech.com to ask me a question. And it's, how do I build a mining rig? Okay, what is a mining rig? Mining rig is a computer designed to build, a computer designed and built to mine Bitcoins, Litecoins, maybe even Terracoins, even though I hear Terracoins are kind of in some degree of trouble, or name coins, PP coins, I don't know, there's one that begins with an F now that I can't remember the name of it. But anyway, so you have all these kinds of coins. And how do we get them? You have to mine them. Now, to describe how mining exactly works, I recommend going to weusecoins.org, which is a website that has a nice little video that explains kind of how it works. It'd take me a while to really explain the bare bones of mining to you. So how do we build a mining rig? How do we build a computer that mines for Bitcoins or Litecoins or something else? And it's a great question. And in fact, just as of this recording, I am presently building a mining rig. And the machine that's getting built right now, I will say runs on the order of $2,000. Okay, let's get price right out of the way. And I think a machine to do, a really good job of mining, okay, because your mining is measured in hash rates, the speed at which it can process through the various blocks of mining. Again, check out weusecoins.org to understand a lot of that. And you're looking for the highest hash rate possible. And to really make it worth your while, there's websites that you can look up that actually tell you, what you can expect from mining based on the hash rate that you're getting with the hardware that you put together, with the mining rig that you've built. Okay. But what I can do is I can give you an overview. All that stuff's great to look into, but what the question's asking and what I'm going to give you is an overview of a really great machine, to build. Again, this ended up being around $2,000. You could probably shave off maybe $300 off of that. And I'll explain why. The main thing with mining, the real key is the video cards, okay, the GPUs, graphic processing units. The video cards that's what really matters. You want as many video cards as you can. Generally, the best motherboards, now this is all getting kind of technical, okay, but I'll try and keep it as layman as I can. Okay. all you're building is a computer. So you have a motherboard. These are the parts you're going to need. All right. You have a motherboard, a CPU, okay, the processor, a motherboard, processor, power supply, RAM, video cards, and of course a case and the hard drive. Okay. You might need a DVD drive to install the operating system on with it. That's up to you. So those are the parts you need. Okay. As far as each one, now again, we're talking about the video cards. You want as many as you can. The average that you can, and like with the most video cards you can have on, in a computer is 4. Okay. There are very few motherboards, all right, which is like the big board that you see inside the computer, that's laying flat. The motherboard, the average one can only handle like 2 or 3. Okay, so you're going to have to hash out for a high-end motherboard if you want to put all 4 video cards on. And this is where I'm saying you can save $300, $400. If you don't go for the 4th video card, you can get a lower-end motherboard because the motherboard quality isn't a big deal. Okay, the video card quality is a very big deal. But the motherboard, as long as it fits what you want to put on it, it's fine. It doesn't have to be anything special. Okay. As far as the processor goes, there's no reason the processor goes onto the motherboard. There's no reason not to get anything other than quad core. Okay. Now remember, this isn't the video cards we're talking about. We're not talking about GPUs. We're talking about a CPU, central processing unit. That one you can, it's not a big deal, but there's no reason not to get a quad core. And if it's above there's speeds on a processor, if it's above 3 gigahertz, you're fine. So that's what I recommend is something quad core, 3 gigahertz and above. They sell octa cores now. AMD sells 6 cores. I don't think there's any real benefit to be had out of putting that much extra power. So you can save a little bit of money there. As far as the power supply has to handle however many video cards you're going to put into this, which is either 2, 3, or 4, I would assume. You can get away with 1, I imagine, but anyway, you want to spend the good money on a power supply. Power supplies have various wattages, and I recommend making sure that the wattage you're getting is over 1,000 watts for the power supply. Okay, and if you're going to have multiple video cards, what you want to look for is see if it says if the power supply says SLI ready. Okay, what that means is that it can handle multiple video cards. Now, with RAM, the RAM chips, you only need 8 gig. Nothing uses 8 gig of RAM. Nothing. I have a laptop with 12 gig of RAM. It's had 12 gig of RAM in it for over 2 years, and just there's no game that pushes the RAM that far. It doesn't matter. Nothing pushes RAM that hard to where, like the rig I'm building right now actually can handle 32 gig of RAM. And there's no need for that. Maybe years down the line, but right now nothing uses that much RAM. Unless maybe I was doing like some kind of video editing, but then I would be getting a much different set of graphics cards. Because that'd be a different purpose. Anyway, so let's get to, the case, the computer case that you get for it if you're building the mining rig is got to be pretty big because it's going to be handling maybe, if you're doing this, it's handling 4 video cards. Okay, now as far as the video, quick with the hard drive. With the hard drive, it doesn't matter. Get any hard drive. That's not that important. Just make sure it's something called SATA. SATA, okay? As long as it's a SATA hard drive, you're fine. You don't worry about that. But let's talk the video cards where it all really matters. And the best video card apparently is what's called an AMD or ATI. They're the same thing. The Radeon 7950. Now that's not the best, but that's the one that like gets your best bang for the buck. Okay, and the cheapest ones run $300. There's just no choice around that. They cost $300 a pop. So if you're going to get 4 of them, you're looking at $1,200. That's where the most of your money is going to be spent when you build a mining rig. Okay, is on the video cards. Now, why the 7950? Why AMD ATI? The reasoning behind that, first off, is that 7950 is pretty close to the highest end. The highest end that ATI makes is, I believe, the 7970 or now. And so, it's a couple models back. So it's, so it has that lower price. Because, a 7970, you're going to hash out $1,200 for one video card. As to where you can get 4 7950s for the same price. Do you see my point? When there isn't there really isn't that huge of a jump. Not as far as mining rigs go, anyway. The other important part of that is, why am I buying an AMD and not an NVIDIA? Why am I buying an AMD ATI and not an NVIDIA video card? Because isn't NVIDIA like the best video cards for gaming and whatever? All true. Yes, NVIDIA cards are the class act of computing. Okay, no question about it. NVIDIA comes up with incredible stuff. It's an amazing company doing amazing things, and they're branching out way beyond even video cards. But they like their drivers. Okay, what actually operates the video card, the drivers, the software that operates the video card on the computer, are all proprietary. And as to where AMD ATI, with their 7950s or any of their Radeon cards, are all open source. And because they're open source, you can tweak, just how much juice you get out of these things on a mining rig. You see what I'm saying? You see the difference? Okay. If you're doing anything other than the mining rig, I generally tell you, go ahead and buy NVIDIA. If you're running a Windows gaming machine, buy NVIDIA. But for a mining rig, you want to go AMD ATI. ATI used to be is a video card company. It used to be its own company. Then AMD bought it. So that's why I keep saying AMD ATI, just so you understand. And it can be confusing because if you go to like Amazon, sometimes they'll list the 7950 as an AMD 7950, or they'll list it as an ATI 7950. You see the confusion there? Okay, so there you go. There's your mining rig as far as like hardware, what you need. You want, if you can do 4 video cards, go for it. If you can't, do 3, do 2, and if you can only do 1, you can only do 1. But you're not going to mine as much, and you have to ask the question: is it really worth my time to run, a computer of that, with even just that much power of one video card, to how much Litecoin or Bitcoin I'm going to get out of it? And, that's something you have to decide, if your electric bill is okay with that. As far as software, the operating system, I recommend putting on Windows 7 because even though, while there's a lot of people who use Linux to do mining, most of the software is very easily written, like GUI Miner, which is the mining software that I recommend. I may link to it in the show notes to where to find GUI Miner. All this stuff works beautifully in Windows 7. So that's my recommendation for an operating system. It installs very simply. It runs in a nice little icon. You don't have to download any dependencies like you would with Linux or whatever. And obviously a mining rig, guess what? You're not going to do a whole lot of mining with a Mac. That's how it is. So I hope that gives you a good overview of a mining rig and what it takes. Those are the specs that you want. If you have other questions, you can email me quick, or hit up Google. Google, there's whole forums where people talk about how to do these great things. But this is what I recommend. You got to expect to spend, anywhere between $1,500 to $2,000 to do this, to where I think you're going to get value. And you will get value, because really, if you spend that much money on it, the machine's going to pay for itself in like a month. You see what I'm saying? Okay. Well, if you have more questions, email me, sovryn@hush.ai. This is Brian Sovryn.
Got an energy spike. Launch.
In the third age of mankind, an age plagued by an evil empire that seeks to destroy humanity, it is our last, best hope for peace. It is Babylon 5.
All fighter squadrons launched.
Get us out of here. Return fire. Well, freeze them.
Watch Babylon 5.
You can watch Babylon 5 and experience the greatest show in television history. See the entire series completely free by going to thewb.com/shows/Babylon 5.
Software of the Week.
It is time for Software of the Week, and this week, this is a really cool piece of software. I don't know if you use like Google Drive or Dropbox or iCloud. There's a lot of these different kind of services that are very, very, very popular, and rightfully so, because what's the purpose of the cloud? Like what does that allow for? Well, you can, back up all your files. You can share files easily. You can, access like multiple computers in the house and access all the same files in the same spot because it's all in the cloud. And you don't have to actually, you don't have to actually like literally carry it around with you. Like on a flash drive from computer to computer, you can just access it over the internet, which is great. But there's a lot of people that have kind of like privacy concerns where they're like, I don't want Google to have all my stuff, or I don't want Dropbox to have everything. Or sometimes these services go down and I don't trust them. And that's all, that's relatively valid. I mean, my opinion, as far as like with Google, Dropbox, I could see crashing, but as far as like with Google, if Google ever crashes, like if Google somehow ever ends to where they're going to lose all your data and all this stuff, for like everybody, the world's over, because the world in a very real sense runs on Google. So, but if you want your own cloud, you're like, I love the idea of the cloud, but I just, I can't get behind these companies having my stuff. Here's your answer. And it's called owncloud, OWN cloud. And now, is there something to the idea that because it's called owncloud and that's NWO backwards, that it's actually the New World Order taking over your information? Whatever. Anyway, sorry, that's me being kind of funny, but I get the feeling some people would actually believe that. So you have owncloud, okay? It's free, it's open source. There are premium like products that they do offer, but you could build a server machine in your house and have that be your own personal cloud. And this software sets it all up so you can access files, you can look at pictures, it works just like Google Drive, where you can open stuff up. It even has like a music tab where you can put all your music onto one machine, and it has software for Android and iPhone. So you could actually connect to your cloud through your smartphone, through your own personal cloud. It's really, really cool. I mean, it takes a little setting up, no doubt about it. Now, and I've got an article from Lifehacker that's in the show notes that helps you how to set it up. Okay, so I'll make sure that's where it's linked to, and then of course that will link to owncloud's website to where you can download it from. But I mean, this is great. Setting up your own clouds. You know what I mean? Doing personal cloud computing and being able to access your stuff. Like, I mean, that's just it. You can leave your house, and through your smartphone still access your music collection. Or access, your contacts or files, or you can back up stuff while you're on the road. You can back up stuff that's on your phone or your tablet, and you can back it up to your cloud at home. I mean, this is really, really cool stuff when you think about it. So I can't recommend it enough. Again, it's called owncloud. You can go to owncloud.com to download it, or again, in the show notes, there's a link to a Lifehacker article that tells you how to set up the music server, how to sync your calendar, an address book, and everything right onto it, at home. Just a top, really, it's a top-notch setup. And and there's people who ask about this. How can I don't trust other people with all my, information. And so here you go. Trust yourself and set up your own cloud system that can work from anywhere. And if you want, hide the server that you put it all on. You know what I mean? And encrypt it, and there you go. This is Brian Sovryn, and I'll be back with more.
What does freedom mean? Tune in to LRN.FM to find out. LRN.FM is the Liberty Radio Network, a collection of live talk radio and podcasts, all coming from a principled pro-liberty perspective. LRN.FM show hosts aren't left, right, or conspiracy kooks. You can tune in 24/7 to LRN.FM via your phone, computer, satellite, and more. Listen free anytime at LRN.FM. That's LRN.FM.
Brian! Stop playing those video games!
Just a minute, Mom.
Game Talk.
It is time for Game Talk. Often my favorite part of the show. Sometimes we talk about good things and sometimes we talk about bad things with Game Talk. But either way, it's fun. And this week we have an article from Kotaku. This is kind of an older one. It's from February of 2013, but it's about it's about Warren Spector. Warren Spector is a guy in the gaming industry, highly respected. He's come up with just these incredibly original games. In particular, one that a lot of people may know is called Day X, which has had recent, sequels come out, or prequels, I should say. Like, I forget what the new one's called, or Human Revolution. It's like Day X Human Revolution. That's the new one. And Warren Spector, when he speaks, people listen because he has come up with such innovative games. And this article, he was at a talk for DICE, which is a gaming company that makes like Battlefield and some other ones. He was in Las Vegas, and the article goes, Warren Spector doesn't think Lollipop Chainsaw should have been made. Now, Lollipop Chainsaw is a game where it's just full of tropes. It's this woman, in a cheerleader outfit carrying a chainsaw. And there's in the game, like, there's zombies or whatever, that she has to, it's a mix. It's a degree, admittedly, it's a degree of mix of like sex and violence, and incredibly stylish too. So anyway, we'll read the article here. Warren Spector, one of the most respected designers out there and the lead creator of the revered Day X, did something unusual for a game designer today. Now, real quick, Day X, one of the things that makes it like why it's so revered is because what shocked a lot of people is that you didn't have to actually be violent to solve the game. By and large, you could you could just sneak around in the game and it's like a first-person shooter, and you could essentially win without shooting anybody, which is amazing in my opinion and very enjoyable. But anyway, at a talk at the DICE convention in Las Vegas, he named a name, or at least he let one of his slides name the name of a game that he says should just not be made. The game, Warner Brothers and Grasshopper Manufacture's violent, lowbrow game, Lollipop Chainsaw. This came up as Spector took his small audience of a few hundred game designers, executives, and reporters through a personal journey, charting his changes as a gamer and game designer from his 20s to his 50s. He's 57.33 now, he helpfully noted. Early in his talk, he made a point about how he used to want longer games. As he got older, he had less time for them and now craves shorter ones. It's not just about time. It's not just about giving me shorter experiences. It's about the content. My interests in content have changed dramatically, and I suspect this is true for many of you. There are some games that should just not be made, by the way. At that moment, when Spector said that, Spector showed an image of Lollipop Chainsaw. This would not be the first time Spector has complained about today's hyper-violent video games, but he's not gone out of his way to be specific. Here he did. Some members of the audience chuckled. I'll not try to be too obnoxious, he continued. When I was younger, that's all I needed. All I needed was to differentiate myself from other people. If it was going to convince my mother that I was a juvenile delinquent, I was there. I needed to be transgressive. Adrenaline rush and spectacle were all I needed. I don't think I was alone in that. Maybe I'm just shallow. When you're this age, spectacle is plenty, and blood sprays and all that stuff is really kind of what you're looking for, because you really want to alienate people in a strange sort of way. You want to shock people, and you want to be different. Not so much anymore. I have no interest in guys who wear armor and swing big swords. I have been the last space marine between Earth and an alien invasion. I really just don't need to go there anymore. I want content that is relevant to my life, that is relevant to me, that is set in the real world. if we're going to reach a broader audience, we have to stop thinking about that audience strictly in terms of teenage boys or even teenage girls. We need to think about things that are relevant to normal humans and not just the geeks we used to be. He went on to commend Heavy Rain and The Walking Dead as two of the best experiences he's had in gaming in a while. Both games made the quotidian interesting. Both games were about real emotions and could make even a simple meal a gripping interactive experience. Okay, so now he had a lot more to say on a lot of that, but it's an interesting, I mean, here's a guy, granted this guy was never, he admits that there was a point where he was into that sort of thing, but here's a guy that really hasn't designed a whole lot of violent games. So he's putting his money where his mouth is, you know what I mean? It's not like he's saying, yeah, okay, I made $1 million off of this really violent game and now I hate them. This is a guy that's delivered on exactly what he's saying. And I think it raises, this goes beyond gaming, really. When he's saying that, when I was younger, I just wanted to, I wanted to be different. And if me blowing up, a ton of people or doing some kind of horrendous, really vicious, violent thing, turn people off, good. He wanted to do that. He just wanted to be different. He didn't want to be violent. He just wanted to be different. And I wonder, if gamers need to ask themselves that question. Why? I think it's always a good thing to maybe sometimes sort of step out of your brain a little bit, step out of your thoughts, step back and ask yourself, why am I thinking this way? Very, very important thing to do. And also, why am I doing what I'm doing right now? And, when you're playing Call of Duty or something, maybe step back for a second. Why am I doing this? And sometimes, gaming has kind of changed, and he doesn't really address this because gaming has become a very social thing now. Not that it's talked about a lot, which it is, but in that you connect with a lot of people through video gaming. You connect to people through, your Xbox Live account. And when you're playing, Black Ops 2, you're connecting with people. Okay, I understand that. He doesn't address that, and he keeps it way too simple. Okay? So, he's not answering those questions, but I do like the idea that he's saying, okay, why don't we look back and see exactly why we're doing this? And maybe the reason game sales are starting to go down is because we're not actually making, games are so real now. They're so real, but they're not actually applying to our life the way we want them to, or they're not something that we can really integrate anymore. Which, all great questions. Now, as far as Lollipop Chainsaw in particular, I thought it was a stunningly stylistic game. And I am not one, I hope the listeners of my show know this, I am not one for violence by any means. But I found it to be, just so ridiculous and over the top. It was kind of like Duke Nukem, where, Duke Nukem is just so crazy, you can't take seriously what's happening on the screen. And it doesn't apply to real life at all. It doesn't make you want to go kill anybody. And so Lollipop Chainsaw, I kind of chalked up to the Duke Nukem syndrome, where it's just so insane, so over the top, and maybe even hypersexualized to a degree that, woohoo. And it just, for some, if someone came up to me and said, yeah, Lollipop Chainsaw was just a good time, I'd be like, yeah, no, I hear you. You know what I mean? It's not as bad. And I really wish he should have said this. He should have been going after Battlefield 3, or Counter-Strike or something and saying, hey, look, guys, these games shouldn't be made. Why are we even, because talk about things that shouldn't apply to life. Why would we want to apply war to our life? And he doesn't really say that, and I wish he did. But all the same, it's great questions. Are you just into certain things because you want to tick your mom off? Are you into certain things just because you want to be different from society and, you don't want to be the muggles or something? Yeah, great question. And Warren Spector, this is a guy, again, he can talk. This is Brian Sovryn. I'll be right back with more Sovryn Tech.
Are you searching for a mouthwatering, all-natural, sweet and sticky treat? What if I told you it was also made by a chef who believes in freedom, just like you? You're not dreaming. This is real. Head over to mandrick.com. That's MANDRIK.com. There you'll find Georgia's famous baklava in classic and dark chocolate flavors. To those with special health needs, Georgia's famous baklava also has a treat for you. Golden delicious, low-carb, gluten-free almond cookies. Order with PayPal or Bitcoins. In just a few days, your sweet treats will await you right at your doorstep. One more time, that's MANDRIK.com for Georgia's famous baklava. Hacker Stories.
It is time for Hacker Stories, where I get to talk about some of the real heroes of the world, black hat, white hat, gray hat, whatever. We talk about hackers. And this week, this is... what I'm about to talk about isn't like very fun. And it's pretty serious, and it's hacking that is an answer to, or maybe not an answer, but is in response to a very real, to a very serious thing that's happening in the world that is affecting millions of lives. And the article, this is from the Examiner, and we actually have kind of two articles here, but it's Anonymous, and that's the hacker group Anonymous, launches Operation Israel and fights for Palestinian human rights. We'll read a little bit here. In the fight for Palestinian human rights, Anonymous has launched the largest cyber offensive in internet history. Operation Israel, otherwise known as #OpIsrael. The virtual campaign is billed as the largest internet battle in the history of mankind that will wipe Israel off the map of the internet, and is being launched by hacktivists affiliated with the international collective known as Anonymous in order to protest Israeli policies in Gaza and the West Bank. On April 6th, 2013, hacktivists associated with Operation Israel released a statement via YouTube announcing the beginning of Operation Israel. The following is an excerpt from that video. To the government of Israel, you have not stopped your endless human right violations. You have not stopped illegal settlements. You have not respected the ceasefire. You have shown that you do not respect international law. This is why that on April 7th, elite cyber squadrons from around the world have decided to unite in solidarity with the Palestinian people against Israel as one entity to disrupt and erase Israel from cyberspace. We are Anonymous, we are Legion, we do not forgive, we do not forget. To the government of Israel, it is too late to expect us. On Twitter, Operation Israel is being coordinated via, they give a hashtag here, you can find it in the show notes for Sovryn Tech, and can be followed, At the time of publication, multiple reports of hacks, defacement, leaks, and other forms of cyber protest are flooding in from around the web. Israeli websites affected by the action could very well number into the thousands before all is said and done. Okay. So Anonymous is essentially declaring cyber war. And this next article is from the Times of Israel. And as cyber war begins, Israeli hackers hit back. And we'll read from this briefly. Anti-Israel hackers stepped up their attempts to pull down Israeli sites over the weekend, with numerous attempted denial-of-service attacks against Israeli government sites. Hacker sites listed numerous websites they claimed to have disabled, and several sites reported slowdowns on Saturday night, but nearly all the sites the hackers claimed to have taken down were operating normally. Among the sites that experienced actual downtime due to attacks were those of Israel's Education Ministry and the Central Bureau of Statistics, which was still offline as of Sunday morning. Meanwhile, Israeli hackers began to retaliate against the anti-Israel hack attacks called #OpIsrael, with an operation of their own against sites in countries associated with the anti-Israel groups. A group called the Israeli Elite Strike Force over the weekend disabled dozens of sites in Pakistan, Iran, Syria, and several other African countries, and even acquired a domain name associated with the OpIsrael attack, opisrael.com. Instead of listing the sites anti-Israel hackers had defaced, that site features educational facts about Israel and the Jewish people and a warning to anti-Israel groups that Israeli hackers were ready to fight fire with fire. Israeli elite strike force seems to have organized quickly in the past few days in response to the threat by anti-Israel hackers to erase Israel from the internet on April 7th. The hackers released a list of some 1,300 Israeli sites that they plan to strike, planning to have begun their attacks already on Saturday. But a check of most of the sites that the hackers claim to have disabled, sites belonging to the Bank of Israel, the Tax Authority, Central Bureau of Statistics, and other government agencies, showed they were operating normally. Several sites were hacked by groups associated with Op Israel, but most of those were privately owned sites. The hackers claim to be identified with Anonymous, but Dr. Tal Pavel of Middle Easternet said that the group behind Op Israel was most likely an ad hoc assembly of Arab hacktivists calling themselves dangerous hackers. The group has not necessarily associated with international hacking group Anonymous, Pavel said. And on Saturday, individuals claiming to be members of Anonymous posted on the forum site 4chan that they were not associated with Op Israel. However, another alleged anonymous site, possibly located in Sweden, on Saturday night claimed that anonymous hackers were involved in the anti-Israel cyber attack. And then, meanwhile, Israeli elite strike force worked on Saturday night to pull down more sites. The group started attacking sites in Pakistan Friday, but took off for Shabbat, which Shabbat is Sabbath. That's Friday night to Saturday night. So the hackers, sorry, it's kind of not funny, but I guess if you want to take on the Israeli elite strike force, do it on the Sabbath, because they're not doing anything. Anyway, the elite strike force said, "We wish all our Jewish brothers a Shabbat Shalom," the group said in its Twitter feed. This was just a little taste before the day of rest, hell's first to come. Okay. Now, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, whatever you want to call it, situation, is unfortunate, doesn't do it enough justice, what's going on over there. I do not consider myself such, but by the popular standards of the world, by the popular standards of the world, I am a Jew. It's just how it is. I have family in Israel, family that I guess and friends, to some degree that I guess I would consider close that live there. So am I being, anti-Semitic in reporting this or anything? No. Clearly not. And, without getting into a tirade about the whole Israeli-Palestinian problem, okay, I am led to believe far more, and I've actually gotten a couple emails to more confirm this, that this is an anonymous doing this. This is a hacktivist group called Dangerous Hackers. And it's a very personal thing that they're doing. This is not some kind of international incident that is occurring, even though it's being treated as such by most people. This is a very personal little battle that's going on. And quite frankly, I mean, Israel, there's updates on this every day, but Israel won this little battle Israel won this battle with ease. They took out the main site that, supposedly anonymous. Again, I don't think it was anonymous. It was Dangerous Hackers, the group called Dangerous Hackers that were doing it. It barely phased, and it's true, it barely phased the country. Which is another reason that I'm kind of led to believe that Anonymous wasn't involved in this, because if Anonymous did it, probably you would have seen it happen. I mean, Anonymous has done against the United States Department of Defense and all that stuff. I mean, they've just done such insane things in the past, that I would have expected more if it really was Anonymous doing it. And, so again, this is a very personal thing. This is not something for the whole world to see. It is something for the whole world to pay attention to, but I did not. Some people were saying, yes, finally some solidarity there. I don't think there's any solidarity in this with Anonymous's actions. This is just one group that has a very what I think is to a degree an understandable personal score that they're trying to settle with Israel. And clearly they still did an impressive job in taking down a couple of Israeli sites, but by and large it's not as big as what the news is making it out to be. But it's interesting to look at because it may be a preview of the kind of wars that are to come in an even grander sense. So this is Brian Sovryn, and I'll be right back with more.
This is Stephanie Murphy, Sovryn Tech producer. You may know me from this show, but did you know that I have my own podcast? It's called Pork Therapy. Pork Therapy is a bit different from other shows. We cover current events, big ideas, and even relationship issues, all through the lens of how we can get more freedom in our lives. Oh, and you'll love Sex and Science Hour. Join me on my website, porktherapy.com. That's PORC therapy.com. Now back to Sovryn Tech.
What are you doing? I can't believe I caught you again. You know, Jesus doesn't approve of this little habit of yours.
I know, baby, I know it's wrong, but it feels so right.
Well, it ain't.
But I've been doing it since I was 12 years old.
It's nothing but a sinful perversion of nature, if you ask me.
But, baby, I don't ever want to stop looking at tech websites, new gadgets, video games, software, or any of that stuff.
Well, then I'm leaving.
Okay. Bye.
Pick of the week.
It is time for Pick of the Week, where I get to talk about, as usual, whatever I want to talk about. I guess, it could be said that pretty much the whole show, the Rembrandt of the podcast canvas, gets to talk about whatever he wants to talk about, because generally, except for a couple segments, I pick the topic. So I suppose, but this kind of gives me the freedom to maybe go full geek sometimes, or maybe to, just do something absolutely ridiculous, or maybe even talk about, a bit of a hobby of mine. And it's just a hobby. It's not something I believe this stuff, but it is a hobby of mine. And one of my hobbies is conspiracy theories. I think when I grew up, I was raised Jewish, and then halfway through being raised, my family became Christians. And, when you go through kind of a roller coaster ride like that, you can't help but get into like conspiracies, because, one religion thinks there's a conspiracy against the other religion and all that stuff. So you kind of get a natural flavor to them. So they've become a hobby of mine, and since becoming an atheist, even more so. Anyway, so what I have here, I have a book, and this is an incredible book, no matter if you believe anything that it says or not. It is an amazingly well-researched, and I mean, again, yet you can question the sources, but it is an amazingly well-researched book. It is an exceptionally popular book, and there's just it's a high-quality piece of work. Now, the book is called Dark Mission: The Secret History of NASA. And this is by Richard Hoagland and Mike Bara. And the copy I actually have is the new edition, revised and expanded. In fact, the new edition, which came out in 2011, which was a couple of years after the original release of the book, there's only 100,000 copies of it that were ever printed. So if you want to get your hands on it, you might want to start looking now, because 100,000 copies isn't a whole lot, especially when they ship around the world. I think you can get it on Kindle though, so don't expect don't worry if you can't find a paper copy. You can get the revised edition on Kindle, I believe. Anyway, now Richard Hoagland, a lot of people may know that name because Richard Hoagland is the guy that in the early 90s, he made very popular this whole face on Mars thing, that there's a face on Mars. He he was big with NASA. He worked with CNN. I mean, the guy is, or at least was relatively legitimate. That's how in the 90s he was able to like get a lot of his, like the Face on Mars thing, you have to understand. I mean, when I was growing up, like that was just almost every commercial break that was on. Now, this isn't, this is the 90s. This isn't the internet age where anything can get promoted. You had to really be somebody to get your stuff, and you had to have some money behind you to get your stuff promoted on TV back then. And he had it because he was legit. Whether he is now to people, that's up to you. But anyway, this book, I kind of talked about, we're just coming off of doing the Privatized Space Special. And in that, briefly, I mention about my theories on the moon. And that's what this is all about. This whole Dark Mission book is about what really went on, essentially, in the Apollo moon missions. And there's pictures here, so if you don't like to read, there's some pictures to see. But anyway, I briefly touched on it in the Sovryn Tech special, the Privatized Space Special, that I'm kind of a third camp. You have the people that believe that the moon landing never happened and that it was all staged, by like Stanley Kubrick or something. And then you have the people who believe that they actually went, and yeehaw America. I'm of the third camp that they did go, but they're hiding something. Now, what do I mean by that? Okay, the reason there's people who believe we never went is because there's a ton of discrepancies in like photographic evidence, in radio evidence, and all this video evidence, all of this stuff. And some of them are discrepancies that don't have a good answer. Some of them do have good answers. There's an episode of Mythbusters that covered a lot of them, and they did a great job on debunking and whatever. Okay, but I am of the camp that they were hiding something. Now, I don't think that they're hiding aliens. Like when you look at this book, you're going to find there's a picture of Data's head, what they call Data's head, which essentially is a picture they found, and they're like looking off this rock face on the moon, and they look down and they see what looks like an android head on the ground. Okay. And then they talk about, there's this picture, some of this you can Google. You could Google Data's head. You can go to Google Images and you can look up Data's head and it'll be there. There's another one called Mitchell Under Glass. And what it is, it's supposedly a picture of Ed Mitchell inside a glass structure on the moon. And like, you can see like cross beams and all this stuff going, everywhere and everything. And that picture, my own opinion, and everyone's open to believe what they want. That picture is nonsense. Like they do, Hoagland and Bara in this book, Dark Mission, they do like some color correction to show you what's really up there. And I think that color correction, at least in that case, is I think they're being a little extreme. I don't, when you look at Mitchell Under Glass, I just don't see it. I see what they're saying about the cross beams, but I don't see that as a giant like glass building. And supposedly that's one of the claims of this book, is that there's all these glass structures up there. And a whole lot of that, just doesn't make sense. And there's a lot more to it too. This isn't just simple conspiracy theory, that they like to lay out in this, and they do talk about Mars. They talk about, Cydonia, where there's the face on Mars and that there's pyramids. They even have pictures in the revised edition. There's pictures of what they say is a destroyed city on Mars. And they compare it to a picture of a destroyed city on Earth. And then, they do a side-by-side in the book. And you make your decision. I don't know that I see a destroyed city there. That's just me. Again, this is a really, really interesting book, though. And it covers a ton of ground. It even talks about hyperdimensional physics, how like at 19.5 degrees latitude, I think it is. It's been a little while since I've read it. That there is always like these weird things that happen on planets, and like that somehow it's kind of a gateway to a degree to hyperdimensional energies and all this stuff. So one can say that all sounds crazy, but I'm giving you a very brief explanation, and I recommend reading the book for yourself. And it is a long book. They really did their homework, and look into it and see what you think of that. before passing judgment on something that, could sound just as crazy as hyperdimensional physics. An example of what they give is one of these hyperdimensional, like, kind of gateway type things would be the giant spot, the storm spot on Jupiter. And I don't know if they tried to equate the Bermuda Triangle with 19.5 degrees or what, but anyway, very, very interesting read. And, there's a lot of questions that get raised with this. In fact, I mean, like the opening chapter is frankly shocking because it's Richard Hoagland, who, again, he was a legitimate reporter and scientist, reporter anyway. Richard Hoagland said, when we went to see, the Apollo launch, a guy walked around the room and laid down in everybody's chair a paper that said everything you're about to see is a hoax, essentially. Like, I don't remember exactly what the paper said, but it was telling all the reporters there for the Apollo launch that, look, this is all staged, this is all faked, it's all being done on sound sets and everything, but you gotta make this all look good. And so Hoagland's, his reason for, like, what he claims, though, is that not that actually it was all faked, but he did it so that he said that the government was doing plausible deniability so that they could say later on, no, look, it was all fake, just in case, just to keep people from looking in the real direction, which is not that it was not real, but in that it did really happen. And there's just things up there that they don't want you to know about, and of course in Hoagland and Bara's case, they're saying that it's aliens, or at least, people not of this earth. A couple questions they raise is that, like, when Neil Armstrong says, that's one small step for man, one small step for man and one giant leap for mankind. They make the claim that somehow that's like a weird thing to say, because he didn't say that's one small step for a man, meaning him. He said one small step for man, as in meaning humanity. But then he says, and one giant leap for mankind. And so one of their claims is, like, wait a minute, what does that mean? And so they have this theory that he was referencing, he says one small step for man, meaning us, meaning human beings right now. And one giant leap for mankind, meaning this, like, grander race of humanity that exists in the solar system or that exists in the universe. Call it what you will. Call it crazy if you want, But, I mean, it's cool. One of the things I like about it is that, boy, does it get you thinking. Like, does it really, go tabula rasa with you and erase the slate and say, no, let's look at it this way. And I love that kind of stuff. I mean, that's part of the reason I enjoy conspiracy theories, because for one, there's always a little bit of truth in there. And for two, it's just such a far out way to think, and it keeps you from getting into complacency, and it keeps you from coming up to the idea that somehow you know everything, because you don't. So, really enjoyable. There's other stuff. Obviously, it gets into Freemasonry, how there's a picture. And so they have a lot of interesting evidence. They take some logical leaps, but they have a lot of interesting evidence in that, like Buzz Aldrin, before he was going up, they had a picture, a glamour shot of all the astronauts together, and he actually he took his wedding ring off and put on his Masonic ring. He's a Freemason. Okay, so they put on a Freemasonic ring, and they're like, well, why did he do that? What's the deal with that? And they, of course, then they talk about how they had communion on the moon, which that's kind of accepted fact. Yes, they did have a communion service on the moon. And that was somehow done with Freemasonic rites or whatever. That part's not fact, but the fact that they had communion is. So, this is interesting stuff. This all came out long before the third Transformers movie came out, which talks about that they found Transformers on the moon or something. So they obviously stole that the people that made Transformers stole that idea from this book, or other material like it. I mean, this book doesn't really go into the idea. There's actually another conspiracy theory about the moon, that the moon is artificial and that it's not real, like that. and that's another. I have a book that talks about that. We could talk about that another time. But that's not, you say to me, Brian, that's crazy. But, now we have space agencies around the world that are claiming that the moon around Mars, Phobos, is artificial and that it was placed there by somebody. So what do you do with that? I don't know. Anyway, this has been Sovryn Tech. Been a pleasure doing this with you. Please do not hesitate to go to Google+. Go to SovrynTech.com if you want. You can now donate Bitcoin and Litecoin by request that you've wished if you want to do that. Thank you very, very much for listening. We'll see you next week.
This has been Sovryn Tech. Visit us at SovrynTech.com. That's SOVRYN Tech.com. There you can connect with us, see more of what you've heard on today's show, and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is open source. We encourage you to share. Later, nerds.